Chapter 351 Stellar Acting. Kate's greed was written on her face, and Saul secretly viewed her in contempt. Truth be told, Saul felt displeased that he had spent millions buying jewelry for Kate just so she could put in a good word for him. "What are you saying, Kate? I couldn't possibly visit you empty-handed, right?" Saul said insincerely. "Plus, it's thanks to the Stewarts that the Masseys got to where we are now. We should be thanking you too. If you hadn't raised a daughter who became the CEO of South Lake Corporation, things wouldn't be going so smoothly for both our families in South Lake City." Saul's words made Kate feel even giddier, and she eyed him in satisfaction. If not for her, Willow wouldn't have achieved her present success. The Stewarts and Masseys wouldn't be enjoying their current status either. Willow was now aware that Kate wasn't her biological daughter, but despite their somewhat frayed relationship, she was still Willow's mother. After laughing, Kate smiled smugly as she loudly instructed the nearest maid, "Make us a pot of the finest coffee in the house." Saul was disgruntled, of course. It had been half an hour since his arrival, and he hadn't even been served a drink yet. Kate had been too busy admiring the jewelry. "Why did you spend all that money? Saul, do you need my help with something?" Kate asked as she sipped her coffee. As people said, there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. She believed Saul's abrupt visit meant he needed a favor. "Oh, I'll have to let you know that I can't lend you any money. The Stewarts are expanding their businesses, too. We can't afford to lend money to anyone else," Kate added. Saul curled his lips. Recently, Kate spent all her time boasting that Carl had earned close to $1 billion. Everyone knew about it now. Naturally, he wouldn't say anything about it now. Still smiling, he said, "I'm not here to borrow money from you, Kate." "That's good then," Kate said in relief. She was obsessed with money and loathed it when people tried to borrow money from her. It didn't matter who it was. She would never lend her money to anyone. "Well, go on. Why did you come to see me?" Kate asked curiously. As long as it didn't involve money, she would gladly entertain him. "You silly girl. Get on your knees and beg your Aunt Kate for help." Saul intentionally glared at Jessica and commanded. As soon as he said that, Jessica instantly fell to her knees in front of Kate. Taken aback, Kate asked puzzledly, "What on earth is going on, Jessica?" "Caspian wants to take action against me, and you're the only one who can help me, Aunt Kate," Jessica cried out after managing to squeeze out a few drops of tears. "Huh? What happened? Why would that good, or nothing Caspian dare to provoke you?" Kate asked. She was even more confused now. Caspian didn't have any contact with the Masseys, so why would he do anything to Jessica? "See, the thing is, Aunt Kate." Jessica spun a tale that covered the gist of the matter. She avoided the whole truth and merely mentioned a small portion of what had happened. Alas, that alone was enough to terrify Kate. If word got out about what the Massey family had done, the authorities would certainly get involved, and the Masseys would have to spend the rest of their lives in prison. "I didn't know about these things, Aunt Kate, but it seems like Caspian and Willow are about to report our family to the authorities. Maybe they've already done it. Please put in a good word for us and tell them not to get involved." Jessica pleaded tearfully. Kate knew that Caspian had connections with the Inspector General. The Masseys would be in big trouble if he did get involved with their situation. "Well," Kate said hesitantly. She was conflicted. Even though she was Willow's mother and Caspian's mother-in-law, her relationship with them was tenuous now. They didn't get along as well as everyone thought they did. It was only on Willow's account that Caspian didn't do anything to Kate. Otherwise, she would have died for her part in causing his foster mother Lilith's death. And this time, Caspian had stumbled across Jessica's messy situation. Even if Kate tried to put in a good word for the Masseys, she didn't know if Caspian would listen to her. She would be humiliated if he refused. After mulling things over, Kate didn't think she could help Jessica. Noticing Kate's reaction, Saul had a bad feeling, so he quickly added, "Kate, this entire situation has nothing to do with Jessica. It's all that bastard Eric's doing. He went behind our backs to commit such heinous crimes." "Yes, that's right," Jessica chimed in, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I had no idea what Eric had been doing. Since he's part of the family, I just wanted to help him improve his circumstances and stop being a street thug. I didn't expect him to go behind our backs and get involved in illegal dealings." Kate's heart softened at the sight of the weeping Jessica. "Does it really not involve any of you? Was it truly all Eric's doing?" Kate asked doubtfully. Of course. I only just found out about everything. So that's why I'm frustrated. That bastard Eric was behind everything. He used our family's power and influence to become a loan shark and extort protection money. Saul twisted the facts around as he recounted what Eric had done. Well, Kate said hesitantly. She was somewhat convinced by them. Bring that bastard Eric in, Saul called out. He and Jessica had planned everything from the start. They had decided to put on a pity act and pretend to be unaware of Eric's bad deeds. In an instant, Eric was hauled in by a few men. One of them kicked his calves, making him fall to his knees. Eric had a blank expression and hollow eyes. It was as if he had lost his soul. Eric, you bastard, tell the truth about all the crimes you committed, Saul hollered as he glared at Eric. Looking at Saul, Eric felt the urge to put up a fight. However, he gave up on that idea when he thought about his wife and family. He couldn't get himself out of this situation anymore. That's right. I started all of the illegal businesses. It was all my doing. Eric gave a summary of what he had done, but of course, it had been Saul who fed him the speech beforehand. Meanwhile, Saul was on cloud 9. He had thrown Eric under the bus, and all the responsibility for the crimes now rested on Eric's shoulders. How dare you commit so many outrageous crimes, Eric? You nearly dragged me down with you. I'm going to make you pay for this. Jessica abruptly screeched. She marched up to Eric and started hitting him. Kneeling on the floor, Eric continued to stare blankly without fighting back. Soon, he was a disheveled mess, and there were a few streaks of blood across his face. After punching and kicking to her heart's content, Jessica returned to Kate's side and got on her knees again. Continuing with her pity act, she lamented, "See, Aunt Kate? You now know the whole story, and you're the only one who can save me. If Caspian and Willow expose everything, I'll be done for. The authorities would surely find out about the whole thing. Plus, even though it was all Eric's doing, our family would still bear some of the responsibility." Kate's expression stiffened as she started pondering the situation. Chapter 352, A Bunch of Hypocrites. After giving it much thought, Kate finally said, "It's not that I don't want to help you, Jessica, but Caspian and Willow have moved out now. Even though I'm Willow's mother, I can't get involved in all of their matters." Actually, Kate was wary of Caspian. If Willow hadn't asked for mercy on her behalf, she might have been dead by now. She didn't want to do anything that would offend Caspian. "What are you saying, Kate?" Saul exclaimed. "Willow's your daughter, and Caspian's your son-in-law. They have to listen to you, of course. And furthermore, Jessica had no idea what Eric had been doing. You just need to tell Caspian and Willow not to report this matter to anyone else." He continued with a smile. "Even if Caspian doesn't listen to you, I'm sure Willow does, right? What would people think if they found out you can't even get your own daughter to listen to you?" Kate was hesitant. She wasn't sure whether Willow would listen to her anymore. Willow had claimed she wanted to cut off all ties with the Stewarts, and Kate didn't know if Willow's anger had subsided yet. However, she was still Willow's mother. Even though they weren't biologically related, she did raise Willow herself. All she had to do was say a few nice things and insist on getting her way, no matter how unreasonable it seemed. Perhaps that would be enough to convince Willow to relent. "Fine, I'll give it a shot, but I can't guarantee you'll get the results you want," Kate said. She dared not make any promises. Otherwise, it would be too awkward for her if Caspian and Willow refused her appeal. Saul and Jessica smiled as they exchanged looks. "Thanks, Aunt Kate," Jessica cried out happily. "As long as Caspian and Willow don't report this matter, I'll give you $200 million to thank you for your help." "How about it?" Saul made his tempting offer with a smirk. $200 million. Kate's eyes lit up the moment she heard she could get $200 million from Saul. "Don't worry, Saul. I'll definitely convince them not to report anything. We're all family, aren't we? We shouldn't harm each other. I'm sure Willow will make sure Caspian does as she says, too," Kate proudly declared. The amount was nothing to sneeze at, and Kate was positively drooling. Who would say no to money? All along, Kate didn't have it easy living with the Stewarts. The situation only improved recently. Therefore, if she got her hands on the $200 million from Saul, she could spend lavishly on herself. Kate figured that Willow would have to show her some respect and give in for the sake of their relationship. Noting Kate's reaction, Saul knew everything was settled. He began to feel smug again. Saul understood Kate very well. As long as he offered her a reward, she wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. But if he didn't offer her something in return, she would refuse to help him. Meanwhile, Kevin was stupefied. Jessica and Saul were such good actors. They had begun their act from the moment they walked into Stewart residence, and they could even shed tears on command. All of a sudden, he felt as if he didn't know them all that well after all. They were like strangers to him now. "Let's go. We'll head over to Riverside Villa to see Willow," Kate said. The group drove over to Riverside Villa, but no one was around. "They're not home? Well, we'll go in and wait for them," Kate said as she brought out a set of keys. She had secretly made a set of keys to Riverside Villa a while back. "I didn't know you had the keys to the villa, Aunt Kate," Jessica remarked in surprise. "Of course. I'm Willow's mom. Isn't it perfectly reasonable for me to enter her house whenever I please? Even if I wanted to move in here, they wouldn't say a word," Kate bragged. In reality, she felt uneasy the moment she said those words. But as she had already bragged as much, she had no choice but to keep up with the act. The moment they entered the villa, they were instantly drawn by the splendor and lavishness of the place. Everyone sat in the living room and waited. 10 minutes later, they heard sounds coming from outside the villa. Caspian and Willow were back. Upon hearing the commotion, Saul grew nervous. Where did Caspian and Willow go? Did they drop by the Inspector General's office earlier? Huh? What's going on? Why is the front door open? Did someone break into our house? Willow gasped anxiously. She and Caspian hurried into the living room, only to find Kate and the others sitting there. The moment Caspian saw them, he glared at them with a murderous gaze. He and Willow were the only ones with keys to the villa's main gate, and there was a fingerprint scanner installed at the front door. How did these people get in? Caspian's eyes fell on Kate. He was sure it was her doing. "Willow, you're finally back. Where were you two?" Kate pretended to greet the two cheerfully. "How did you guys get in?" Willow questioned icily. She didn't want to answer Kate. Since there were other people around, she didn't want to say much. But she wanted to know how they managed to enter her house without permission. "Aunt Kate has the keys to the house." "Willow, why are you surprised?" Jessica asked. In an instant, Kate's expression became a little unpleasant. "What?" Willow exclaimed. Frowning, she reined in her anger and asked, "Mom, how did you get the keys to my house?" She never gave Kate a set of keys to Riverside Villa. If not for the others present, she wouldn't even acknowledge Kate as her mother. After all, they weren't related by blood. "I stayed at the house a while back, didn't I? Well, I forgot to give the keys back to you then, so I figured I'd just bring them over now," Kate said with a sheepish chuckle. At last, Saul and the others realized that Kate's relationship with Willow was unlike what she claimed earlier. "Let's not talk about this right now. Your uncle's here to see you. Why aren't you greeting him?" Kate quickly changed the subject. "Here to see me? Why would he have the nerve to come and see me?" Willow scoffed as she eyed Saul in displeasure. After what happened with Cora and the Masseys, Willow detested the Masseys through and through. "How can you be so rude?" Kate admonished with a stiff expression. It was one thing for Willow to treat her differently, but she shouldn't be treating Saul so coldly. "You know nothing. Do you know what he has done in South Lake City? He's been running a loan shark business and casinos. Who knows how many lives he has ruined? Everyone hates the Masseys now. A guy like him doesn't deserve to be my uncle," Willow shrieked in anger. The entire incident with Cora and Flora made Willow realize just what kind of people the Masseys truly were. She no longer wanted to have anything to do with them. If not for the fact that Kate did raise her, she would have ignored Kate as well. "How can you say that, Willow? He's your uncle. I know you're displeased with me, but you can't treat your uncle this way," Kate rebuked, feeling humiliated. "It's fine. I'm sure Willow just doesn't know me very well. It's been a long time since we last met. Or maybe she misunderstood something about me," Saul quickly said. Chapter 353, Unreasonable. Seeing as Willow and Kate were about to get into a fight, Saul quickly said, "Let's just all calm down. Willow's probably in a bad mood right now. After all, she's the CEO of South Lake Corporation. She must be very busy all day. It's normal for her to get irritated easily." "Oh, stop with your nonsense. Don't bother acting in front of me, Saul. Even if others don't know what the Masseys have done, I know everything," Willow snapped in fury. She was disgusted by Saul's attempt to be the good guy. Saul felt humiliated. After all, he was still Willow's uncle, yet she insulted him without showing him any respect. He assumed that she had grown haughty ever since she became the CEO of Southlake Corporation. His eyes flashed viciously, but he soon composed himself. Alas, Caspian, who was standing in silence, caught the fleeting change in Saul's emotions. He quietly watched as the scene unfolded, trying to see what Saul and the Massies were up to. Willow, did you get the wrong idea about me somehow? We should spend more time together. I know you're under a lot of pressure at work. I won't hold this against you, Saul said with a forced smile. Willow remained expressionless. She didn't buy a single thing Saul said. Before she became the CEO of Southlake Corpora, Sean, the Massies kept saying her husband was a useless piece of trash and called her a disgrace to the F. Right now, Saul was beginning to feel regretful. If he had known Willow would one day become the CEO of Southlake Corporation, he would have certainly established a good relationship with her. Who knew how powerful the Massies could have become with the help of Southlake Corporation? Look how sincere your uncle's being, Willow, and look at you. You threw a tantrum the moment you came into the house. We're your elders, you know. Shouldn't you be a little more polite? Kate rebuked. Willow was infuriated. She couldn't believe that Kate had the gall to lecture her. Fearing that she would lose her composure, she kept quiet and sat down on the couch. As Willow hadn't responded, Kate dared not say anything else. In the past, she would have most definitely continued lecturing Willow. But as she needed to convince Willow and Caspian to help the Massies later, she figured it was best if she didn't press the matter now. Just then, Cora and Flora entered the house. Cora was dressed shabbily, and she looked uncomfortable. Flora stuck close to Cora and looked around timidly. Where did these two beggars come from? Who allowed you to enter the house? Kate screeched. She thought Cora and Flora were beggars. In fact, even beggars dressed better than they did. Cora stammered. She didn't know what to say. It was her first time entering such a massive house, and she felt incredibly uncomfortable. Mom, stay out of this. I hired Madame Upton to be my housekeeper, Willow said with a frown. What did you say? Kate exclaimed. Why did you hire a beggar? And look, she even has a retard with her. Kate could tell that Flora was different from normal people. Judging by Flora's absent-minded gaze, Kate figured the young woman was intellectually disabled. Willow, even though I don't want to meddle with how you run your household, I still need to give you a word of advice. You can't hire people like them to work for you. Who knows? They might turn out to be thieves. You'll regret this decision once things start going missing, Kate declared. She was humiliated by the fact that Willow wanted to hire a beggar as her housekeeper. If word got out, everyone would laugh at her. She had finally established a respectable image in front of all her friends. It would be terrible to let a beggar ruin all her efforts. This has nothing to do with you. This is my house. I can hire anyone I want. Not only am I hiring her, but I'm going to let her stay with me, too. You're calling her a thief, huh? What do you have to say about the keys you have, then? Willow questioned icily. She was not going to tolerate Kate's nonsense anymore. Are you determined to go against me? Kate shrieked in outrage. I don't care. You're a beggar as her housekeeper? I'm going to kick her out of the house right now. Mom, stop being so unreasonable, Willow retorted in anger. Kate was being as absurd as ever. Thank you for all your help, Miss Stewart. You've already done a lot for me. I think we should go, Cora said. The fight between Kate and Willow made her upset, too. Having decided to leave, she took Flora's hand. Madam Upton, Willow quickly called out. Hurry up and get lost. Take a look at yourself. How can you even think about working in such a grand villa? Do you think you're good enough? Kate scoffed with a look of disdain. That's right. Willow, as your uncle, I have to talk some sense into you, too. You're the CEO of Southlake Corporation now. It wouldn't be good for your reputation if people found out you hired a beggar to be your housekeeper, Saul chimed in. Cora turned away. She was upset by the things Kate and Saul said about her, even though life was tough. She lived with dignity still. Yet, Kate's words cut her deeply. They weren't beggars. Cora relied on no one but herself to support herself and Flora. Even though Flora was intellectually disabled, that didn't make her a retard. Kate's insults gave Cora the urge to rip Kate's tongue out. She didn't care what others said about her. She could put up with that. However, she would never allow anyone to insult Flora. In her eyes, Flora was the best daughter in the world. No one compared to her. Kate's words were far too hurtful. Cora had never done a single dishonest thing in her life. She worked hard for an honest living, yet Kate accused her of being a thief. Nevertheless, Cora knew she came from a lowly background. Despite being insulted, she dared not say anything. She was too afraid to put up a fight. Still holding Flora by the hand, Cora immediately walked out of the living room. Perhaps they shouldn't have come over after all. Chapter 354 came knocking in person. Willow grew frantic when she saw Cora leaving. She knew that Cora and Flora had to be heartbroken from the harsh treatment they received. "Hold it! You don't need to leave," Caspian called out. Startled, Cora turned around and looked at Caspian. "This is my house, Madam Upton. I have the final say. Stay here, and don't worry about anything. I'd like to see who'd have the nerve to chase you out," Caspian declared. His words unshackled the floodgates. Consumed by aggrievedness, Cora started crying. Her heart warmed when she heard what Caspian said. All along, she and Flora lived an unsteady life without any support from anyone, but Caspian was being so nice to them. She had never felt such warmth before. But Kate flew into a rage after hearing what Caspian said. "Caspian, are you insisting on going against me? So what if this is your house? I'm your mother-in-law. I'm Willow's mom. You have to listen to me. I'm not leaving until you do," she screamed. "Shut up," Caspian roared back. His voice was so loud that Kate froze in shock. How dared he show that attitude toward her? "What do you think you're doing, Caspian? Don't forget that you're the steward's matrilocal son-in-law," Kate snarled through gritted teeth. Caspian scoffed in derision. What gave Kate the audacity to be this bossy with him? She was sticking her nose in his business. This was his house, and he could do whatever he wanted. "Oh, what makes you think you get a say? This is my house. If you don't want to stick around, then get out. Don't try to throw your weight around here. If you can't understand me, then you should see a doctor for help," Caspian snapped as he glared at Kate. He wasn't going to put up with her. Kate was stupefied. How dared Caspian insinuate that there was something wrong with her? How could he, her son-in-law, treat her this way? She was infuriated. However, Caspian continued to exude an imposing air as he stood there with no intention of compromising. He had already put up with a lot in the past and never settled the score with Kate. But he would never allow her to chase out Cora and Flora. Their lives were hard enough as it was, and they weren't beggars. Moreover, Cora was a much more decent person than Kate. If Caspian hadn't held back for Willow's sake, Kate would be dead by now. She was the most outrageous mother-in-law to ever exist. "You bastard! How dare you go against me? How dare you insult me, Caspian? I didn't let you marry my daughter just so you could stand there and ridicule me," Kate screeched as she wagged her finger at Caspian. She was trembling with rage. How dared Caspian humiliate her in front of other people? She was determined to teach him a lesson. Otherwise, if word got out about this, everyone would mock her. The more Kate thought about that, the angrier she grew. Willow couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and shouted, "Mom! Can you stop causing a scene here? Stop being so unreasonable. This house belongs to Caspian and me. We have the right to hire anyone we want. Also, if not for me, do you think the stewards would reach their current status? Well, Caspian has helped me out a lot. Without him, I wouldn't have become the CEO of Southlake Corporation." She was fuming. At last, she realized why Kate wasn't her biological mother. They were entirely different people. A reasonable person wouldn't be causing such a scene for no good reason. Caspian had indeed helped Willow out with a lot of things. It just wasn't public knowledge. Without him, Southlake Corporation wouldn't have continued to expand its influence. Alas, Kate seemed to have grown used to demanding her way no matter what. Even though she knew the villa belonged to Caspian, she insisted on trying to keep Caspian and Willow under her thumb. She was determined to make Caspian and Willow follow her orders. She couldn't accept that it wasn't possible anymore. She was still in denial. Willow felt helpless. She didn't know how to deal with such an unreasonable mother. She rejoiced at the fact that Kate wasn't her biological mother. Otherwise, she would have a breakdown. "I see how it is. You're all grown up now and refuse to listen to me anymore," Kate screeched. She never thought Willow would disobey her. Even though she wasn't Willow's biological mother, she still raised her. Willow never acted this way in the past, but she started changing ever since she got together with Caspian. Kate cast a resentful glare at Caspian. It was all his fault. He was the reason behind the change in Willow, who even wanted to cut off all ties with her. Caspian shook his head. Kate was incorrigible. If not for the fact she had raised Willow, he would have taken action against her by now. Sensing that things were going south, Saul stepped forward and berated, "Caspian, Willow, what's up with you two? How can you treat your mother like that for the sake of an outsider? As your uncle, I feel the need to lecture you two. You should have some basic respect for your elders." Naturally, he only said that because he was unaware of the Stewart family's situation. Caspian smirked. Saul sure knew how to put on an act. He approached Saul and eyed the latter sharply. "I was just about to visit you to talk to you, Saul. I didn't expect you to come knocking instead." While pointing at Cora and Flora, Caspian continued, "They're not just any outsiders. Take a closer look and see who they are. They're just two beggars. I would never be associated with such lowly people." Saul scoffed as he glanced at Cora and Flora in disdain. Saul was telling the truth. He had never seen Cora and Flora before. Despite being in charge of the Massey family's affairs, he wasn't involved in all the day-to-day matters. "You don't know them, but someone does," Caspian said as he approached Eric. After kicking Eric, he pointed at Flora and asked, "Recognize her? If Willow and I hadn't made it over in time, I'm afraid you would have died at your hands by now." Everyone looked at Eric. Earlier on, Eric got a bad feeling when he saw Cora and Flora, but he didn't have the right to speak up. "I do. I know who they are. She's Cora Upton, and that's her daughter," Eric replied. Having witnessed just how powerful Caspian was, he dared not do anything to rile the latter up. He knew he would suffer terribly if Caspian got physical with him. "You're Cora Upton?" Saul and Jessica exclaimed as they froze in shock. Cora was the reason why the Massey family's illegal activities got exposed. Caspian found out about the Massey's shady dealings through her. They didn't know if Caspian had informed the authorities about their acts yet. Saul and Jessica were panicking. Things were taking a turn for the worse. Chapter 355, Utter Despair. All of a sudden, the atmosphere grew tense. The nagging feeling that Saul and Jessica felt intensified. "You know who they are now, right?" Caspian barked at them. "What do you mean by that, Caspian? Why does it matter whether or not we know who they are?" Saul deflected by pretending to be ignorant. Too lazy to mince words with Saul, Caspian threw a stack of paper at Saul and growled, "Take a look at this. It's an account of everything the Masseys have done." Saul picked up a few sheets of paper and glanced through them. The moment he saw what was written on them, he froze. It was a detailed account of all the Massey family's illegal dealings, including a ton of evidence. In an instant, Saul started shaking, and his expression turned ugly. "This isn't true. It's all slander." "The Masseys did no such thing," Saul bellowed as loudly as possible to hide his fear. Caspian scoffed in derision. Saul was still trying to put up a fight. How dared he try to weasel his way out when the evidence was right under his nose? "Bring him in," Caspian shouted. Before returning to Riverside Villa, Caspian had instructed Bernard and his people to bring Diego over. After hearing the order, they brought Diego into the villa. The moment Saul spotted Diego, he became even more terrified. "Don't tell me you don't know who this is, Saul," Caspian said as he pointed at Diego. "As a matter of fact, I don't. Don't try to trick me, Caspian. You're trying to frame us with false accusations, aren't you? If you insist on doing this, I don't mind getting the authorities involved," Saul declared with fake confidence. Caspian guffawed. Saul was such a brilliant actor. If the Inspector General's office got involved, the Masseys were doomed. "It's your time to shine. Diego, tell us everything you know," Caspian commanded as he kicked Diego. Diego's lips parted. His sweat had drenched through the back of his shirt. Although he didn't know who Caspian was, he saw the amount of respect Bernard and Lincoln showed Caspian. Lincoln used to be the wealthiest man in the Two Lakes area, and since he was willingly serving Caspian, Caspian had to be someone incredibly powerful. "I did everything under your orders, Mr. Eric. I wouldn't have dared to otherwise," Diego said as he looked at Eric. He dared not lie. "Don't fucking try to accuse me. I don't know who you are. Stop spouting nonsense," Eric roared back. He was making one last attempt to absolve himself of all wrongdoing. Perhaps he could get out of this situation unscathed if he pinned all the blame on Diego. Diego was stunned. All along, he had simply carried out the Massey family's orders. Why were they refusing to admit their part in the matter now? What were they trying to do? Why aren't you telling the truth, Mr. Eric? You were the one who told me to do everything. You asked me to collect payment from Cora. How can you turn around and say otherwise now? Diego exclaimed with widened eyes. Hey, fucker, how dare you say such bullshit? I'm going to teach you a lesson, Eric snarled as he raised his fist and lunged at Diego. Eric just had a bold idea. As long as he could kill off Diego, there would no longer be any evidence that led back to him. Diego was terrified. He knew full well what Eric was capable of. Eric used to be a street thug with a criminal record. He had gone to prison for beating up someone. Diego immediately tried to back away. Just then, Caspian came forward and blocked Eric's fist before kicking him in the calf. A loud crack rang out. My leg! My leg! Eric howled in agony as he stumbled to the floor, trying to attack the witness. Huh? Caspian uttered icily. Diego finally realized what was happening. That bastard Eric wanted to silence him by killing him. If that happened, he would have become the scapegoat for all the crimes. Eric, you bastard. You tried to make me the scapegoat, didn't you? Don't even think about it. Thank goodness I kept my guard up, Diego shouted. Turning to Caspian, he said, I kept an important piece of evidence, Mr. Lynch. I'll give it to you now. Diego opened his shirt to reveal the book he was hiding. This is a record of every single loan I ever gave out. Mr. Lynch, it also includes all of my communication with Eric. I swear that everything in here is truth, Diego declared as he passed the book to Caspian. Looking at the accounts book, Caspian was taken aback. Despite the severe beating Diego received earlier, he didn't reveal his trump card. He was indeed loyal to a fault. Unfortunately for him, he was nothing but a pawn to the Masseys. They were willing to cast him aside to save their own skins. Are you still going to try and weasel your way out of this? Caspian asked coldly. Eric fell into utter despair. It seemed impossible for him to get out of this now. After going through the account records, Caspian's expression turned stormy. The menacing air he emanated made everyone realize the severity of the situation. Eric, you bastard! I can't believe you've done so many despicable things. The list of crimes here is enough to get you the death penalty 10 times. Oh, Caspian roared as he threw the book at Eric. Many of Eric's wrongdoings were recorded there. Please spare my life, Mr. Lynch, Eric begged. He had no choice but to admit his crimes now. Tell me who's the real mastermind behind all of this. Whose orders have you been following? Caspian questioned with a frown. First, Eric faltered as he glanced at Jessica and Saul. Why are you looking at me, Eric? Who told you to go behind our backs and commit such heinous crime? Don't tell me you're trying to drag me down with you, Jessica shouted. She shot a furious look at Eric to send him a message. After all, she couldn't say it aloud. Eric paled. He knew he had no choice but to be the scapegoat. His family would be in danger if he didn't admit to being the mastermind. All he could do was take the fall. It was his fault for allowing Saul to hold something against him. Perhaps he could have had a chance to save himself if Saul hadn't taken his family. He couldn't disregard his family's safety just to save himself. He couldn't allow himself to be that selfish. After thinking about it, Eric clenched his jaw and said despairingly, It was all my doing. Mr. Lynch, it has nothing to do with the Massey family. Chapter 356, The Masseys Apologize. Upon hearing what Eric said, Caspian fixed his eyes on him. His piercing gaze unsettled everyone. With just a single look, he made them feel tense and pressured. Saul and Jessica exchanged looks, feeling a sense of relief. Yet, a strange smile spread out across Caspian's face. No one could read his expression or figure out what he was thinking. Have you thought things through, Eric? If you confess to being the mastermind of these crimes, you'll be imprisoned for life, and you might even get the death penalty, Caspian asked. Eric began hesitantly, but in the end, he did not finish his sentence. He feared death just like any other ordinary human being. But what choice did he have? There was no other option available to him. After a brief struggle with himself, Eric decided against resisting. All he could do was accept his fate. Eric, are you trying to worm your way out of taking responsibility for all the heinous crimes you committed behind our backs? Even if you're willing to risk it all, you should think about your family, Saul shouted at Eric with all the strength he could muster. He was frightened that Eric would spill the beans on everything. Eric froze briefly before letting out a hollow sigh. He couldn't say anything. That's right. It was all my doing, I confess to the crimes. I accept whatever punishment that is given to me, Eric declared with his head lowered. Saul exhaled in relief. Since Eric had confessed to the crimes, Caspian couldn't do anything to the Massies. Meanwhile, Eric kept his head lowered to hide his tears. He knew full well he would never be able to escape this situation from the moment he took the fall for the crimes. Caspian frowned. He didn't expect this outcome. The evidence he had was enough to take out the entire Massey family. But now, Eric was taking the fall for all the criminal activities and absolving the Masseys of all responsibility. That meant he couldn't take down the Masseys anymore. Even if the authorities got involved, they wouldn't be able to do anything. After recalling what Saul had said, Caspian deduced that Saul was using something to coerce Eric. What a cunning plan it was! I didn't expect you to be so sly, Saul. Eric is a Massey, too. Are you telling me that these crimes have nothing to do with the Masseys at all? Caspian asked with an amused smile. Saul was harder to deal with than Caspian had expected. Eric, from this moment onwards, you're no longer related to the Massey family in any way, Saul immediately announced. Eric was dumbstruck. Did Saul just kick him out of the Massey family? Eric was overwhelmed with resentment. Saul was capable of doing the most cruel and vicious things just for the sake of saving himself. Ha! Eric scoffed. Nothing he said now would make a difference. You have nothing more to say now, right, Caspian? This whole situation has nothing to do with the Masseys. It was all Eric's doing, Saul said as he looked at Caspian. He felt thoroughly pleased with himself. To think that Caspian wanted to go up against him. Well, Caspian wasn't his match at all. Yeah, Caspian said with a nod. In that case, we won't take up any more of your time, Saul quickly said. He didn't want to stick around any longer than necessary. He felt stifled in Caspian's presence, and the pressure he felt suffocated him. However, seeing as the Masseys were about to leave, Caspian called out, "Hold it, what is it? Did you need something?" Saul asked puzzledly. "There's one more thing we haven't settled yet. Madame Upton and her daughter Flora were nearly beaten to death by Eric. You can't deny this fact anymore, right? Well, Eric was a Massey when it happened. Shouldn't you be offering your apologies?" Caspian asked grimly. Saul was startled. What was the big deal about hitting someone like Cora? In any case, she and Flora were still alive and kicking. "Just come right out and tell me what you want, Caspian," Saul huffed impatiently. He was no pushover, and if Caspian had the nerve to threaten him, he wouldn't hold back either. The Masseys must apologize to Madame Upton and Flora. Also, they had to be hospitalized. If we add up their hospital bills and other various expenses, it comes up to a sum of $50 million, Caspian said with a smile. Upon hearing that, everyone was astonished, including Cora, who was rooted to the spot in shock. She was stunned to see Caspian demanding that the Masseys apologize to her. Furthermore, he even asked them to give her $50 million in compensation. Cora was merely a street cleaner. She didn't think the Masseys would show her such courtesy and respect. She saw the displeased look on Saul's face. Would someone like him apologize to her? It had to be a joke, right? Why would Saul apologize to a street cleaner like her? Also, Cora thought Caspian had gone too far by asking for a compensation of $50 million. That was a ludicrous sum of money. The look on Saul's face made Cora feel anxious. "Mr. Lynch," she called out nervously. As he smiled at Cora, Caspian stated, "I'll settle this matter properly, Madame Upton. You and Flora sutured serious injuries. You deserve to be compensated." Since he had made his stance clear, Cora didn't think it was her place to say anything. She knew he would certainly see to it that the matter was resolved. Caspian fixed his piercing gaze back on Saul and said coolly, "If you don't agree to compensate Madame Upton, Saul, don't blame me for not showing any mercy. Even though Eric has taken the fall for all the criminal activities, I doubt the Massey family can survive a thorough investigation, right?" "You," Saul snapped, his body shaking from anger. But alas, he couldn't do anything. Though he could have tried to argue with Caspian, the sharpness of Caspian's gaze scared him. He abruptly recalled what happened to the Yorks and Flying Dragons. The annihilation of the Yors and Flying Dragons was undeniably related to Caspian. Therefore, Saul didn't believe Caspian was truly the loser he was said to be. He feared Caspian would take action against him if he didn't agree to his terms. Caspian was right, of course. Although Eric had confessed to the crimes, the Massey family couldn't afford to be investigated. "Fine," I'll do as you say, Saul growled through gritted teeth. He walked up to Cora. Dad, why did you agree to do it? Why should we apologize to a lowly person like her? Jessica shrieked in discontent. She couldn't understand why she had to apologize to Cora, who was just a street cleaner. She couldn't accept it either. Shut up, Saul roared. Trembling in fear, Jessica clammed up. She had never seen Saul getting this mad at her before. Naturally, Saul was reluctant to apologize to Cora too. If anyone found out that he, the man in charge of the Massey family, had apologized to a street cleaner, he wouldn't be able to hold his head up high in public again. He knew that everyone would laugh at him, but could he refuse to do it? If Caspian got the authorities involved and conducted a thorough investigation, the Masseys were doomed. I'm so sorry. Ultimately, the arrogant and domineering Saul had no choice but to yield. Chapter 357, $50 million in compensation. Seeing that Saul had apologized, Jessica and Kevin lowered their heads. Meanwhile, Cora was so overwhelmed by her emotions that she started trembling. All the aggrievedness she felt exploded out of her, and her tears kept flowing. She was indeed a member of the lowest ranks of society. If not for Caspian, she and Flora might be dead by now. Cora led Flora over to Caspian and Willow. Then, nodding, she said, Mr. Lynch, Miss Stewart, thank you so much. She dared not imagine what would have happened to her and Flora if they hadn't met Caspian and Willow. The Masseys had no regard for unimportant people like her. Meanwhile, her sobs got on Saul's nerves. Exasperated, he took out a check and scribbled a figure on it. Here, Saul said as he passed the check to Cora with great reluctance. His heart ached for the money he had to spend. After all, $50 million was no small sum. But because of Caspian, he had to fork out all that money. Saul was disgruntled, but he couldn't do anything about it. If he didn't hand over the money, Caspian might get the authorities to investigate the Masseys. If that happened, the family would lose far more than just $50 million. It might spell the end for the entire Massey family. Saul didn't want to win the battle but lose the war. He could still discern what was truly important. Cora froze in shock as she stared at the $50 million check. Hands trembling, she dared not take it. $50 million was an unimaginable sum to Cora. She only earned a little more than $1,000 a month as a street cleaner. She would never earn $50 million in her lifetime. Her sudden change in fortune overwhelmed her. What's the matter? You don't want it? I'll take it back if you don't, Saul snapped. He wanted to get out of this place at once. Just the sight of Caspian alone suffocated him and reminded him of the amount of money he was losing, courtesy of the former. Well, Cora was still hesitant. She didn't know whether to take the check or not. She glanced at Caspian to seek his opinion. Take it, Madam Upton. You deserve to be compensated. Go on. With me around, no one will dare to do anything to you, Caspian declared coolly. He knew what she was worried about. Compared to the Masseys, she was like an insignificant speck of dust. Furthermore, she had witnessed just how vicious the Masseys were. The Masseys could easily wipe her off the face of this planet if they wanted to. With Caspian's assurance, Cora finally had the guts to reach out and take the check, though her hands kept trembling the whole time. It was $50 million. What an unthinkable sum that was to her. Cora couldn't describe the emotions she felt. Meanwhile, Saul was upset beyond words. After taking a deep breath to compose himself, Saul looked at Caspian and asked, "We can leave now, right?" "Sure," Caspian replied with a nod. "But before that, I have a word of advice." His expression turned icy as he continued, "There's no way of hiding the truth. You know very well what you Masseys have done. If you want to save yourselves before it's too late, turn yourselves in. Maybe you'll get a more lenient sentence." Saul stiffened. He picked up on the hostility in Caspian's words and figured the latter didn't intend to let the Masseys off the hook. Caspian was merely holding back for the time being. Faking innocence, Saul retorted, "That's nonsense. I don't know what the hell you're saying." In reality, he was fraught with anxiety. "Let's go," Saul barked before leading Jessica and Kevin out of Riverside Villa. As Kevin walked out, he glanced at Eric. He knew that Eric was done for. Eric was still kneeling with a hollow expression, while Diego was lying injured on the floor. Caspian glanced at both men before instructing, "Take them away. Hand them over to the Inspector General's office. Mr. Lynch, please have mercy. Since I gave you the records, Please go easy on me, Diego shouted. Alas, no matter what he said, Caspian remained unmoved. On the other hand, Eric didn't even bother to speak. He didn't want to fight to get out of this situation anymore. He knew it was pointless, so he didn't want to waste his breath. Hubby, is the situation really that simple? Willow murmured after approaching Caspian. She had remained quiet all along because she didn't think it was right for her to get involved. After all, Saul was still her uncle, and she didn't want the Masseys to end up too terribly. However, deep down inside, she knew that Eric couldn't have committed all those crimes alone. Therefore, she didn't try to put in a good word for the Masseys. If she did, she would have felt bad for all the people who had suffered at the hands of the Massey family. Willow chose to have faith in Caspian, and from the looks of it now, he didn't seem to be going after the Masseys. That was rather unlike him. It's not that simple, of course. This matter needs to be thoroughly investigated, Caspian replied with a faint smile. Willow shook her head sullenly. True enough, things weren't quite so simple, and Caspian would get to the bottom of things. Alas, the Masseys had brought the whole thing upon themselves. Meanwhile, Kate's greed was stirred up by the $50 million check that Cora was holding. She didn't care about the situation between Caspian and the Masseys. It didn't matter that she was a Massey. All she cared about was money. Walking up to Cora with a haughty expression, Kate shamelessly held out her hand and shrieked, "Hand the money over!" With a scornful expression, she continued, "A street cleaner like you doesn't deserve to have $50 million. Have you no shame? Can you even live with yourself if you accept the money?" Cora froze. She thought Kate had a point. She shouldn't be accepting this money. Since Kate was Willow's mother and Caspian's mother-in-law, it seemed reasonable enough to give the money to Kate instead. But Cora didn't understand why Kate had to degrade her that way. Why did a man as principled and righteous as Caspian have such an unreasonable mother-in-law? Nevertheless, Cora dared not say anything. After all, she was merely an impoverished member of society. Kate was pleased with Cora's silence. She reached out to snatch the check away from Cora. "Hold it," Caspian snapped as he came over. He grabbed the check and stuffed it into Cora's pocket. "This money is rightfully yours, Madam Upton. No one can take it away from you. Don't mind what anyone else tries to do. All you have to do is keep the money. Remember, now, this is your money. No one can snatch it from you." Chapter 358, Flying into a Rage. Cora was so deeply moved that she teared up. She was just a stranger to Caspian, while Kate was his mother-in-law. Yet, he had taken her side and helped her. "Thank you so much," Cora said sincerely. She no longer knew how she could ever express her gratitude. "You're being too courteous, Madam Upton. Use the money to treat Flora's condition," Caspian said with a smile. At his words, Cora's tears streamed down her face. In the past, due to their impoverished state, Flora didn't get the medical treatment she needed. In time, leading to her current condition of seeming less intelligent than average. Flora meant the world to her, and she was so overwhelmed by everything Caspian had done for them that she fell to her knees and cried out, "Thank you so very much, Mr. Lynch. Without you, Flora and I might have died by now. I'll do whatever it takes to repay the kindness you've shown us. You don't need to be so courteous with me, Madam Upton." "I only did what I should have done," Caspian said as he helped Cora back on her feet. As Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war, it was his duty to care for the citizens of Diaturan, and it was only right for him to contribute what he could to help those who were having a tough time. Caspian would never hold back if he knew that crimes were happening. If not for the relationship between the Masseys and the Stuarts, he would have taken action against the Masseys by now. It was his obligation as Lord Caspian. He would never stand by and watch as the citizens of Diaturan suffered. "Caspian!" Kate screamed. She couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you helping an outsider, you bastard? You're going against me to help two people who aren't related to you. Don't forget who you are. You're just the Stuart family's matrilocal son-in-law," Kate screeched with a bitter expression. She was his mother-in-law. How dared he ignore her? Kate was determined to put Caspian in his place. Otherwise, she would not be able to hold her head up in the Stuart family. She had long forgotten how terrified of Caspian she used to be. All she could think about was settling the score with him. She had nearly gotten her hands on the $50 million, but because of a few words from Caspian, the money had flown beyond her reach. That was $50 million. not $50,000. Kate didn't think Cora deserved to get that much money. Furthermore, Willow was the one who helped Cora. Since Willow was her daughter, wasn't it right that Cora gave the money to Hay? How could Cora be greedy enough to pocket all $50 million? In Kate's eyes, Cora was a terrible person. You can leave now, Maud and Upton. Your accommodations will be arranged. From now on, you'll work for us here at Riverside Villa, Caspian said to Cora, ignoring Kate. But, Cora said hesitantly, she was still concerned. She didn't want Caspian's relationship with Kate to be affected because of her. Cora already felt deeply indebted to Caspian for all the help he had given her. She didn't want to cause trouble for him. Madam Upton, you can move in without worrying about anything. This is my house, no one will dare to mess with you, Caspian said with a smile. He knew what she was worried about, but he assured her with full confidence. Caspian was no longer going to tolerate Kate the way he used to. If she crossed the line, he wasn't going to hold back. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cora said once more before leaving with Flora. Kate was infuriated to see the two of them leaving. Caspian had totally disregarded her. He had humiliated her. Caspian, are you set on going against me? I forbid you from letting that woman stay here, or I'll fight you, Kate screamed. Shut up! Caspian roared at Kate as he glared at her. How dare you raise your voice at me? Kate shrieked in fury. Caspian had changed. In the past, he was a spineless loser who never dared to raise his voice to anyone in the Stewart family. But now, he didn't even show any respect for her, his mother-in-law. Kate trembled with rage. She wanted to lash out at Caspian. Meanwhile, Caspian was fed up with Kate too, and he had felt this way for some time now. He would never go easy on her if not for Willow's sake. Out of consideration for Willow, I don't want to start a conflict with you. But if you continue being this unreasonable, I won't hold back anymore. I haven't settled the score with you for what you did in the past. Keep this up, and I might throw you out. I hired Madam Upton. This is my house. You don't get to butt in and order me around, Caspian declared as he glared threateningly at Kate. Caspian exuded a naturally dominant air that overwhelmed Kate that could barely breathe. He knew exactly what kind of person Kate was. A leopard couldn't change its spot. Though she had behaved herself for a while, she was starting to cause trouble again. Thus, he knew he needed to give her a harsh warning. How infuriating! The nerve of you! Kate shrieked in outrage when she saw the look in Caspian's eyes. Alas, he was too frightening. His gaze looked murderous. Kate dared not kick up a fuss any longer. You better heed my words and reflect on them, Caspian said before walking off. He couldn't be bothered to argue with Kate any longer, though he hoped she would turn over a new leaf and stop being so unreasonable. But if she continued to cause trouble for them, he would certainly take action against her. Soon after his departure, Kate finally snapped out of her daze. Flying into a rage, she screeched at the top of her lungs. Caspian, you bastard! How dare you criticize me? You're just the Stewart family's matrilocal son-in-law. How dare you take that attitude with me when I allowed you to marry my daughter? That wasn't enough for her. Turning to Willow, she continued, Look at him. Willow, look how arrogant he's become. Why are you still with him? Divorce him right away. There are tons of wealthy young men who are far better than him. Kate was used to acting condescendingly with Willow, who used to obey her every word. She forgot that Willow now knew about her true ancestry. Either way, she couldn't put up with the way Caspian had treated her. Kate's unreasonableness exasperated Willow. In the past, she would have chosen to bear with it. But now that she knew she wasn't Kate's biological daughter, her attitude had changed. Still, to save their dignity, Willow didn't want to argue with Kate. Mom, can you stop being so unreasonable? I'm warning you. You'd better not make Caspian angry. He's not the useless trash you think he is. He's not the Stewart's matrilocal son-in-law either. He's my husband. I'm proud to be married to him. He contributed to getting Southlake Corporation to where it is now too, Willow said exasperatedly. Chapter 359, The Aggrieved Kevin. Willow continued, If I did divorce Caspian, I might even lose my position as CEO. If that happens, no one will try to suck up to the Stewarts anymore, and the Stewarts won't be enjoying the glory they have now. I love Caspian very much. I won't leave him no matter what, so stop trying to drive a wedge between us. If you have nothing else to do here, please go back to Stewart residence. Once she finished speaking, she went upstairs and returned to her room. Willow didn't want to continue talking to Kate anymore. She would have tolerated Kate's behavior in the past, but now that she knew about her real parentage, she no longer felt the need to be as understudy. In any case, her relationship with the Stewart family was tenuous now. Meanwhile, Willow's disregard was the last straw for Kate. She immediately exploded in anger. "You wretch! You're all wretches! How dare all of you go against me? How infuriating!" Kate screamed. She had been left alone in the living room, and all she could do was shout to vent her fury. "Just you wait! Caspian! I'm not done with you!" Kate snarled before leaving Riverside Villa. At the same time, someone else was cursing at Caspian, too. Back at Massey Manor, Saul was bellowing in rage. "Caspian, you bastard! Just you wait! I'll kill you someday!" Several sharp crashes followed as many of the antiques in the living room got thrown to the floor. The Massey family's household staff stood silently with their heads lowered. Once, a household staff approached Saul during his temper tantrum, and he gave that person a severe beating. Meanwhile, Saul was still scarlet with fury. How dared that bastard Caspian demand that he apologize to Cora, a street cleaner? It was outrageous. He was also furious over the loss of $50 million. "Dad, calm down, or you might give yourself a heart attack," Jessica quickly urged. "Eric has taken the fall for us now, so Caspian can't do anything to us anymore." "You're still so naive," Saul rebuked. "Do you really think Caspian will let us off the hook just like that? Why are you so foolish? He just can't do anything to us for the time being." Jessica was alarmed. "Dad, are you saying that Caspian's going to investigate us till?" Jessica asked in terror. Caspian was related to the massacre of the Yorks and Flying Dragons. If he was the one who did it, then it means he's a ruthless man who's hidden his claws very well. The Yorks were once the most prominent and influential family in South Lake City, but look what happened to them. "They're all dead now," Saul declared gravely. All along, he kept his eye on the goings-on in South Lake City. At the time, he got a strange feeling about the sudden annihilation of the Yorks and Flying Dragons. And following that, the rumors about Caspian increased. Due to that, Saul had begun to feel fearful. He had a feeling Caspian wasn't just a loser. Caspian's earlier warning only served to intensify his anxiety. Even if Caspian were indeed an ordinary person, the Masseys would still be in trouble if he reported the situation to the authorities. "We're related to the Stewarts, Dad, so why is Caspian still determined to come after us?" Jessica asked puzzledly. If Caspian was simply the Stewart family's matrilocal son-in-law, there was no reason for him to involve himself in this matter. He wouldn't gain anything from it. Furthermore, was he not going to consider the relationship between the Stewarts and the Masseys? "I'm afraid Caspian's identity isn't as simple as you think. Even Lincoln Zott, the wealthiest man in the Two Lakes area, is working for him. Think about it. If someone like Lincoln is willingly serving Caspian, what does that say about Caspian's identity? In any case, our family has been expanding our influence a little too quickly lately. We've done far too many unspeakable things," Saul said helplessly. He couldn't figure out who Caspian truly was either. All of a sudden, Kevin came running in while shouting, "Dad! Something terrible has happened." After seeing how panicked Kevin was, Saul shook his head exasperatedly and admonished, "Hey, now! You're my son-in-law. Why are you losing your composure just because something has happened? Where's your sense of decorum?" In the past, Saul approved of Kevin and thought he would be a good match for Jessica. But alas, Kevin couldn't hold a candle to Caspian. "Go on. What is it this time?" Saul asked impatiently. "Well," Kevin faltered. He couldn't find the right words. "Hurry up! Why are you hesitating? Why can't you be more of a man?" Jessica snapped hotly. Kevin felt very offended, so much so that he almost cried. His life with the Masseys was not a good one. Saul and Jessica often scolded him over the smallest mistakes. He finally realized just how suffocating and unbearable it was to be a matrilocal son-in-law. After taking a deep breath, Kevin announced, "Dad, Lincoln Zott has shut down all of our businesses in South Lake City." "What did you say?" Saul exclaimed, his eyes widening. "Earlier today, Lincoln and his men seized all of our businesses in South Lake City, including the clubs and bars. The inspectors from the Inspector General's office were with him. And they also sealed off our businesses for further inspection, Kevin reported nervously. Overwhelmed with rage, Saul started coughing and heaving. Dad, are you okay? Jessica squealed as she quickly rushed over to hold him steady. Is Caspian trying to wipe out our family? Saul howled. It had not been easy for the Masseys to set up their businesses and expand their influence, but now, everything was sealed off for investigations. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the family, and their future was up in the air. Meanwhile, Kevin rather enjoyed seeing Saul's reaction. It didn't matter to him what became of the Masseys. And if Saul did get a heart attack and drop dead, he would feel satisfied. Just then, a crisp slapping sound rang out. Kevin felt one of his cheeks stinging in pain. Jessica had slapped him. You useless loser! Why didn't you stop them? Jessica rebuked Kevin. Now that the Masseys' businesses had been sealed off for investigations, the family was bound to suffer a huge loss. All Jessica could do was take her anger out on Kevin. She blamed him for the situation. It was all because he was such a loser. If she could have become the CEO of a major conglomerate like Willow, no one would dare do anything to the Massey family. How was I supposed to stop them? Lincoln used to be the richest man in the Two Lakes area, and he had the Inspector General's office backing him up. I would only be dooming myself if I tried to stop them, Kevin retorted, offended. He knew that Jessica was just venting her anger on him, and the thought of that intensified his resentment. Stop coming up with excuses. If you'd been as bold and decisive as Caspian, we wouldn't have lost our businesses, Jessica shot back. She didn't want to listen to his excuses. She immediately started punching and kicking him. That's enough! Stop it! Saul shouted at Jessica, who had completely lost control of herself. Kevin's face was covered in blood. Deep down inside, he had made up his mind. Sooner or later, he would make Jessica pay for the way she treated him. He was determined to get even with her. Chapter 360, Gaining an Informant. Dad, why are you stopping me? Jessica asked. We lost so many of our businesses because he's such a loser. Too furious to process the situation, Jessica shoved all the blame onto Kevin. Kevin's right. Even I would have a hard time dealing with Lincoln, let alone him. We can't blame him for everything, Saul said as he shot Jessica a look. Now that he had calmed down, he knew this was no coincidence. Even if the Masseys tried their best to stop this, it would be futile. Instead of wasting time scolding Kevin for what happened, it was better for them to focus on finding a solution to their crisis. However, Jessica had more to say. But, that's enough! Quiet! Saul barked, cutting her off. Then, he turned around and gave Kevin a pat on the shoulder. Jessica was just a little too emotional just now. That's why she took her anger out on you. You won't hold it against her, right, Kevin? Kevin was speechless. What were Saul and Jessica doing? Were they trying to use both the carrot and the stick on him? Of course, no matter how disgruntled Kevin was, he dared not voice his discontent. Forcing out a smile, he said, Of course, Dad, Jessica's my wife. Why would I hold this against her? Saul nodded and said, Good. You're a good son-in-law. Go and get your wounds treated. It wouldn't be good if someone saw you looking like that. All right, Kevin said before leaving. Once he was gone, Jessica huffed in dissatisfaction. Why are you being so courteous with that loser, Dad? You're being too short-sighted. That bastard is still of use to us. We need to care about his feelings, Saul said coolly as his expression hardened. How can a loser be of any use to us? Snorted scornfully. Saul didn't reply. He knew Jessica wouldn't understand even if he explained himself. Let's stop talking about him and think about what we should do next, Saul said with a frown. The Masseys were caught in an unprecedented crisis. If they didn't overcome this, the entire family would be in danger. During the process of expanding their power and influence, the family had made numerous enemies. If their enemies found out about the Masseys' predicament, they would certainly seize the chance to bring down the family, too. Do you have any ideas, Dad? Jessica hastily asked as the severity of the situation dawned on her. No, we'll have to ask my dad, Saul said as he shook his head. Grandpa? Jessica exclaimed. Meanwhile, over at Zot Manor, Caspian was sitting on the couch as he questioned Eric coolly. Hurry up and tell the truth. Did the Masseys instruct you to commit those crimes? He knew things weren't as simple as they seemed. Eric was just a puppet. I did it all on my own accord. It has nothing to do with the Masseys, Eric replied apprehensively as he kneeled on the floor. You? Eric? Without the Masseys giving you orders, Would a hooligan like you dare to do those things? Are you saying this because you want to be their scapegoat? Do you know what the consequences are? You might be spending the rest of your life in prison, Caspian said with a derisive chuckle. Don't bother asking any more questions. I did it all myself. Do whatever you want to me, Eric said with great difficulty. He didn't want to hear what Caspian had to say anymore. The sooner he was handed over to the authorities, the sooner his wife and family would be out of harm's way. Eric, I'm guessing the Massies have leverage over you. Is Saul using your family to coerce you? Caspian asked with a smile. Eric froze. Then, he whipped his head up and stared at Caspian as he asked, How did you know? It's easy enough to uncover such a simple matter. A quick investigation suffices. If I can save your family, are you willing to be the witness and expose all of the Massies' doings? Caspian asked. Sylvia's intelligence network could not be underestimated. Eric's eyes lit up and he hurriedly asked, Can you do it? Why should I believe you? That's not a problem at all. Bring them in, Caspian called out. Bernard brought 2 people in, a woman and a little girl. Eric was stunned to see his wife and daughter. Daddy, Daddy, the little girl cried out. Eric, are you all right? The 3 of them hugged each other and sobbed. That's enough. You've seen each other. Time to go, Lincoln said. Bernard and his men took Eric's wife and daughter away. Eric, his wife exclaimed. Don't worry, I'll be fine, Eric assured her tearfully. He could only watch as his wife and daughter were led off. Meanwhile, Caspian remained seated on the couch with a nonchalant expression. It was as if he knew he had everything under control. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. If I tell you everything the Massies have done, will you spare me? Eric asked with his eyes fixed on Caspian. He had to get Caspian to vouch for his safety. You must pay for your crimes. You're going to prison, Caspian said curtly. Eric was a little disappointed, but he knew full well that he had committed numerous crimes. It would be a little unrealistic of him to think he could get away unscathed. Still, as long as he stayed alive and voluntarily acted as an informant, he might get a more lenient sentence. With his mind made up, Eric declared, I'm willing to tell you the whole truth, Mr. Lynch. I hope you'll keep your promise. I'm a man of my word, Caspian declared proudly. A long time ago, a dying comrade of Caspian had asked him to seek revenge on his behalf. For that reason alone, Caspian went deep behind enemy lines and braved through an army of hundreds of thousands to kill the enemy's commander. Naturally, as someone who became the Diatoranian god of war, Caspian had an indomitable spirit. He would certainly do as he said. Having made up his mind, Eric told Caspian everything the Massies had done, and Lincoln made a record of everything Eric said. Thus, the Massies' crimes were brought to light. Everyone who saw the list of crimes would be infuriated. The Massies had been aggressively expanding their influence, and in the process, they got involved in numerous unlawful businesses, including running illegal casinos and clubs. Even Lincoln was thunderstruck. He couldn't believe that the Massies had done so many despicable things. They had no respect for the law at all. Caspian slammed his hand against the stone table in front of him, which cracked and fell apart. Everyone was shocked. Caspian was truly furious.